Jenny lay on her bed, surrounded by pillows and blankets. Her three closest friends, Danielle, Ashley, and Lauren, were sprawled out around her. They had been laughing and joking all night as they watched scary movie after scary movie. The dim light from the TV
cast eerie shadows across the room, adding to the spooky atmosphere. Danielle, the meanest of them all, cackled maniacally as a particularly gruesome scene unfolded on screen.
This is why we're better than her,
she sneered, nodding towards the character being tormented on screen.
We'd never let anyone treat us like that.
Lauren smirked in agreement.
Yeah, we'd make sure they paid for it.
Ashley giggled nervously, her eyes darting between her friends. She was always happy to be part of their group, but she couldn't help feeling uneasy about their cruel comments. Still, she didn't want to be left out or seen as weak, so she forced a laugh and joined in their mockery.
Jenny felt a pang of guilt as she listened to her friends talk about bullying someone else. She knew firsthand how it felt to be on the receiving end of their cruelty, specifically towards Sarah, a girl from their school who was quiet and shy. Jenny had once been part of the group that tormented Sarah, but lately she had started to feel bad about it. She couldn't shake the feeling that what they were doing was wrong. As the movie continued to play out its gruesome tale of revenge and retribution, Jenny found herself lost in thought. She wondered what would happen if Sarah ever found out how they treated her. Would she seek revenge just like the character on screen? The thought sent a shiver down Jenny's spine as she realized just how far-reaching their actions could be. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from downstairs. Something had fallen over in the living room. The girls all jumped up in fright, their laughter replaced by gasps of terror as they listened for any further sounds. After a few tense moments of silence, they decided it must have been nothing more than a coincidence and settled back down onto their beds with shaky breaths and nervous glances at each other. But deep down inside, Jenny knew that something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Jenny's heart raced as the phone rang, startling her from her sleep. She had forgotten that Danielle and Lauren were still over at her house for the sleepover. The two girls had been relentless in their bullying of Sarah, and Jenny couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt every time she thought about it. Danielle answered the phone, her voice confident and familiar with the routine.
Hello?
She said into the receiver. There was a moment of silence on the other end, and then Danielle laughed nervously.
Is anyone there?
She asked, her voice trembling slightly. The other friends exchanged worried glances, their eyes darting around the room as if they were looking for something hidden in the shadows. Who still called a landline? Ashley clutched at her pillow tightly, her face pale with fear. Jenny felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead as she realized that something was definitely wrong. But Danielle dismissed their concerns with a wave of her hand.
It's probably just a prank call,
she said dismissively.
Don't be such babies.
Despite her bravado, Jenny could see a glimpse of fear in her eyes as she hung up the phone and returned it to its cradle. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of their breathing and the ticking of the clock on the wall. Jenny couldn't shake off the feeling that they were being watched, that someone was lurking in the darkness outside their bedroom door. She tried to push these thoughts aside, telling herself that it was just her imagination running wild, but deep down, she knew better. Something wasn't right, and she couldn't shake off this uneasy feeling no matter how hard she tried. Jenny's heart raced as she picked up the phone to call back the mysterious number that had called earlier. She dialed the digits quickly, her fingers trembling slightly. The line rang once, twice, 3 times, and then nothing. There was no answer. She tried again and again, but each time the line went dead after just a few rings. A chill ran down her spine as she realized what this could mean. The phone line had been cut. Someone had deliberately severed it, leaving them isolated and vulnerable in their own home. Jenny's mind raced with possibilities. Was it Sarah seeking revenge? Or was it someone else entirely? The others noticed Jenny's growing unease and looked at her with concern. Ashley reached out to take her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. Danielle and Lauren exchanged nervous glances, their usual bravado replaced by fear. They were all acutely aware of how exposed they were now, cut off from the outside world and trapped in a house with an unknown threat lurking in the shadows. Jenny tried to calm herself down, reminding herself that they were all in this together and that they would find a way out of this situation. But deep down, she knew that things were about to get much worse before they got better. The sudden darkness was like a physical blow, and Jenny felt her heart race as she fumbled for her phone's flashlight. The dim glow cast eerie shadows across the room, making everything seem distorted and unreal. Ashley let out a high-pitched scream, and Danielle and Lauren snickered nervously, not knowing how to deal with this fear. Jenny could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up as an ominous silence settled over the house.
What the hell?
Ashley demanded, her voice trembling with fear.
Did someone cut the power?
Jenny nodded, her eyes darting around the room as she tried to make sense of what was happening. She could hear faint whispers echoing through the darkness, but she couldn't quite make out what they were saying. It was as if someone or something was trying to communicate with them, but they were too afraid to listen.
Maybe we should just wait it out.
Lauren suggested, trying to sound brave but failing miserably.
The power will come back on soon.
But Jenny didn't think so. There was something sinister about this darkness, something that made her skin crawl and her heart pound in her chest. She could feel a presence in the room with them, watching them from the shadows, waiting for its moment to strike. And she knew that they were all in danger. As they huddled together in fear, Jenny realized that she had made a terrible mistake by inviting Ashley, Danielle, and Lauren over for this sleepover. They had brought their cruelty and bullying with them, and now it seemed like they had attracted something far worse than their own mean spirits. She wished she could take back those invitations and send them all home before it was too late, but it was already too late for that now. Jenny's heart raced as the darkness enveloped them. The power outage had left them in complete darkness, and the silence was deafening. She could hear her own breathing and the faint sound of Ashley's ragged breaths beside her.
Do you think it's Sarah?
Ashley whispered, her voice trembling with fear. Jenny hesitated before answering. She didn't want to admit it, but there was a part of her that thought it could be Sarah. The way she had been acting lately, so quiet and withdrawn, it was almost as if she had a secret agenda.
Maybe.
Jenny said finally, her voice barely above a whisper.
But how could she do all this? Cut the phone line and the power.
Lauren snorted derisively.
Sarah's not that smart. Besides, she's just a girl.
Danielle nodded in agreement.
Yeah, let's not give her too much credit.
But Jenny couldn't shake off the feeling that Sarah was capable of more than they gave her credit for. As they huddled together in the darkness, Jenny couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up on her. What if Sarah really was out there, watching them? What if she was planning something even worse? The thought made Jenny shiver uncontrollably, and she clung tighter to Ashley for comfort. Jenny's heart raced as she heard Danielle's blood-curdling scream. She exchanged panicked glances with Ashley and Lauren, their eyes wide with fear. Danielle, however, seemed to have regained her composure. She took a deep breath and announced that she was going to investigate the source of the noise in the dark hallway. The others hesitated for a moment before reluctantly agreeing to let her go alone. Jenny couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt for her part in bullying Sarah earlier that day at school. If only they hadn't been so cruel. Maybe this wouldn't be happening now. As Danielle disappeared into the darkness, Jenny could hear her footsteps echoing down the hallway. The power outage had left the house shrouded in an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of their own breathing and Danielle's footsteps. Suddenly, there was another noise, a soft thud followed by a silent laugh. Jenny felt her blood run cold as she realized that whatever was out there wasn't friendly. She gripped Ashley and Lauren's hands tightly, her knuckles turning white as she tried to steady herself. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she listened to the silence that followed the thud. She glanced at Ashley and Lauren, their eyes wide with terror. They knew something was wrong, and Jenny could feel the panic rising in her own chest.
We have to find out what happened,
She whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. Ashley and Lauren nodded, their faces pale in the dim light of the flashlight they were holding. They crept through the house, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Jenny's heart raced as they approached the downstairs kitchen. As they pushed open the kitchen door, Jenny's eyes widened in horror. Danielle lay on the floor, her body limp and lifeless. Blood stained her clothes and the carpet beneath her, and Jenny felt bile rise in her throat as she realized that Danielle had been murdered. Ashley let out a scream, clutching at Jenny's arm as they backed away from the gruesome scene. Lauren stood frozen in place, her face a mask of terror. Jenny felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had been part of this group that had tormented Sarah for so long, and now one of them was dead. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in the house with a killer. They had no way to call for help. As they huddled together in fear, Jenny couldn't help but wonder if Sarah was somehow involved. As soon as the question raised in Jenny's head, a familiar voice spoke up. It wasn't Ashley's, it wasn't Lauren's, it couldn't be Danielle's. It was Sarah's.
Good evening, ladies.
They all turned their heads towards the voice and saw her standing there with a bloodied knife. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at Sarah, the bloodied knife in her hand. She couldn't believe that the girl they had tormented for so long was now standing over them, ready to strike. Sarah's eyes were cold and calculating, and Jenny could see the satisfaction in her gaze.
You're next.
She hissed, her voice low and menacing. The words sent a chill down Jenny's spine, and she felt a wave of terror wash over her. She glanced at Ashley and Lauren, their faces pale with fear. They knew what Sarah meant. They were all in danger now. Jenny tried to think of a way to escape, but the doors were locked, and the windows were too high to reach. They were trapped, at the mercy of a killer. As Sarah advanced on them, Jenny felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew she had to do something, anything, to survive. With a sudden burst of energy, she lunged at Sarah, trying to knock the knife out of her hand. The two girls grappled with each other, their bodies twisting and turning as they struggled for control. Ashley and Lauren watched in horror as the fight escalated, their hearts pounding in their chests. Finally, Jenny managed to disarm Sarah, sending the knife flying across the room. But Sarah wasn't done yet. She grabbed a nearby kitchen knife and lunged at Jenny again. This time, however, Jenny was ready for her. She ducked under Sarah's swing and delivered a powerful kick to her stomach, sending her sprawling across the floor. As Sarah lay gasping for breath on the ground, Jenny realized that they had a chance to escape, if they could just find a way out of this house before Sarah recovered enough to stop them again. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she led Ashley and Lauren up the stairs, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way to keep them safe. She could hear Sarah's heavy breathing behind them, getting closer with each step. They reached the top of the stairs and Jenny quickly pushed open the door to her bedroom, ushering her friends inside. The room was small and cluttered, but it was their only hope. They slammed the door shut and frantically searched for something they could use to barricade it. Finally, they found a heavy dresser that would do the trick. They pushed it against the door just as Sarah burst into the room, knife raised high. The girls screamed in terror as Sarah lunged at them once again, but they were prepared this time. They huddled together behind the dresser, their hearts pounding in their chests as they waited for Sarah to make her move. Jenny could feel sweat dripping down her face as she listened to Sarah's heavy breathing on the other side of the dresser. She knew that they were in grave danger. If Sarah managed to break through, there would be no escape. She glanced at Ashley and Lauren, their faces pale with fear. They all knew what was at stake. Their lives depended on finding a way out of this situation alive. As they huddled together behind the dresser, Jenny couldn't help but feel a sense of guilt wash over her once again. She had been part of this group that had tormented Sarah for so long, and now they were paying the price for their actions. She wondered if there was any way to make things right. But for now, all she could do was focus on staying alive and finding a way out of this deadly game. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she huddled with Lauren and Ashley in the dimly lit room. The power outage had left them trapped in her bedroom, their only source of light coming from a small flashlight that cast eerie shadows on the walls. They had all heard the anonymous phone call, and now they knew that someone was watching them. Lauren crossed her arms defensively, her eyes darting around the room as if she expected Sarah to burst through the door at any moment.
What's done is done.
She muttered, trying to sound confident but failing miserably.
We can't change what happened.
Ashley shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes.
I wish we could.
She whispered.
I never wanted any of this to happen.
Jenny felt a pang of guilt wash over her. She had always known that bullying Sarah was wrong, but she had gone along with it anyway. Now, Sarah was out for revenge, and they were all paying the price. She looked at Lauren and Ashley, feeling a sense of betrayal and anger towards them both.
This is all our fault.
She said harshly.
We should have known better than to treat Sarah like that.
Lauren recoiled at Jenny's words, her face contorting into a mask of disgust.
Don't you dare blame me for this.
She snapped back.
I didn't start it.
Ashley looked on nervously, unsure of who to side with. She had always been loyal to Lauren and Jenny, but now she felt torn between them and the memory of Sarah's innocent face.
Maybe we should try to make things right.
She suggested tentatively.
We can apologize to Sarah and try to make amends.
Jenny scoffed at Ashley's suggestion, shaking her head vehemently.
It's too late for that.
She said bitterly.
Sarah wants revenge, and there's nothing we can do to stop it now.
As they continued to argue amongst themselves, Sarah listened intently from the other side of the door. She could hear every word they said, every note of fear and guilt in their voices. And with each passing moment, her anger grew stronger. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she heard Sarah's voice from the other side of the door. She could feel Ashley's fear radiating off of her, and she knew that they were all in danger.
I only want Lauren,
Sarah said, her voice low and menacing. Jenny exchanged a quick glance with Ashley, and they both knew what they had to do. They had to give Lauren to Sarah in order to save themselves. It was a decision that weighed heavily on their hearts, but they knew that it was their only chance. With a deep breath, Jenny and Ashley pushed Lauren in front of them as they moved aside the dresser that was blocking Sarah from entering the room. Lauren looked terrified, her eyes wide with fear as she saw Sarah standing there, a wicked grin on her face.
Come here,
Sarah said, beckoning Lauren forward with a crooked finger. Lauren hesitated for a moment, but then she reluctantly moved towards Sarah. Jenny and Ashley watched nervously as Sarah took hold of Lauren's arm and pulled her into the darkness beyond the door. They could hear muffled screams and the sound of struggling, but they dared not intervene. They knew that if they did anything to anger Sarah, it would be their turn next. As the minutes ticked by, Jenny and Ashley huddled together in fear, waiting for their own fate to be decided. They knew that they had made a terrible mistake by bullying Sarah all these years, and now they were paying the price for their cruelty. As the silence outside the door grew more oppressive, Jenny couldn't help but wonder if they would ever make it out of this alive. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she clung to Ashley, her eyes darting around the dark room. The sound of Sarah's footsteps climbing the stairs sent a chill down her spine. She knew what that meant. Sarah wasn't coming for just Lauren anymore. She wanted them all. The dripping of blood from Sarah's knife echoed through the house, a grisly reminder of what had happened to Danielle. Jenny swallowed hard, trying to suppress the bile rising in her throat. She couldn't let fear consume her. They needed to stay alive. Ashley squeezed Jenny's hand, their eyes meeting in silent communication. They both knew what they had to do. They had to outsmart Sarah and find a way to escape. But how? The power was out, and the windows were barred from the inside. They were trapped, and Sarah was closing in on them. Suddenly, there was a loud crash as Sarah burst into the room, brandishing her bloody knife. Jenny and Ashley screamed and scrambled for cover, but it was too late. Sarah was upon them, her eyes wild with rage and desperation. In a split second, Jenny saw an opportunity, a broken vase lying on the floor near her feet. She grabbed it with both hands and swung it at Sarah with all her might. The vase shattered against Sarah's skull, sending fragments of glass and porcelain flying everywhere as she crumpled to the ground, unconscious or dead. Jenny couldn't tell which. But the spirit of revenge that fueled Sarah's anger made her regain consciousness far too quickly. As she stood up, she was now laughing uncontrollably and hysterically. The evil that emanated from her eyes darting to Ashley and Jenny was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Now Sarah was swinging her bloodied knife almost aimlessly. With each swing, her rage grew stronger and stronger and stronger. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as she crouched behind the sofa, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could hear Sarah's heavy footsteps echoing through the room, the sound of her bloodied knife slicing through the air. Every now and then, Jenny caught a glimpse of Sarah's pale face, twisted into a mask of rage and madness. As Sarah continued her relentless hunt, Jenny felt a sudden jolt of fear as she heard Ashley's muffled screams coming from somewhere nearby. She knew that Sarah had her friend, and that there was nothing she could do to help her. Tears streamed down Jenny's face as she clutched at the fabric of the sofa, praying that somehow, some way, they would both survive this nightmare. But then, there was another scream. Louder this time, more desperate, and Jenny knew that Ashley's time had run out. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to block out the sound of Sarah's knife slicing through flesh and bone. She could hear Ashley's final gasps for breath before everything went silent once more. Jenny felt a wave of despair wash over her as she realized that she was now completely alone in this house with a killer who had now claimed 3 lives. She knew that it was only a matter of time before Sarah found her too, and the thought filled her with terror. She could hear Sarah's labored breathing, the sound of her footsteps as she circled around the room. Jenny knew that she was the last one standing and that Sarah would stop at nothing to kill her. Suddenly, there was a loud thud as Sarah pulled the couch out from under Jenny, sending it crashing to the floor. Jenny felt herself tumbling out from behind it, landing hard on her. Back! She scrambled to get up, adrenaline pumping through her veins as she saw Sarah lunging towards her with a knife raised high. Jenny's instincts kicked in, and she kicked out with all her might, connecting solidly with Sarah's chest. The force of the blow sent Sarah stumbling back, dropping the knife in the process. Jenny didn't hesitate for a second. She grabbed the knife and held it tightly in her hand, ready to defend herself if necessary. Sarah recovered quickly, her eyes filled with fury as she charged towards Jenny once more. But this time, Jenny was ready. She dodged to the side just as Sarah swung at her with a broken piece of furniture. The 2 girls collided in a flurry of limbs and screams, their bodies crashing against each other with brutal force. In the end, it was Jenny who emerged victorious. She managed to disarm Sarah and pin her down on the floor, holding the knife firmly against her throat.
You hurt my friends.
She hissed through gritted teeth.
Now it's your turn.
Sarah looked up at Jenny with a mixture of fear and defiance in her eyes.
You can't kill me.
She spat out.
I won't let you.
But Jenny didn't listen. Instead, she pressed the knife ever so slightly against Sarah's neck, feeling the cold metal bite into her skin.
I can and I will.
She said firmly.
This is justice for what you did.
For a long moment, neither girl moved or spoke. They simply stared each other down, locked in a deadly standoff that would determine their fate once and for all. And then, everything went red.